Golden State Media Concepts Sci-Fi Podcast. Together we dive into the world of sci-fi and science fiction. From episodes of Star Trek, Star Wars, to The Walking Dead, Resident Evil, all the hot new science fiction movies from the back doors of Marvel or DC. The Golden State Media Concepts Sci-Fi Podcast. You'll never look at science fiction the same way again.
Brought to you by the GSMC Podcast Network. I'm your host, Alex. Today, we are picking up with the second half of The Boys Season 2, Episode 2. There is a lot to unpack this season, you guys. I've already watched the first 5 episodes. I'm holding off a little bit on 6 until I can get these other ones recorded before they start all meshing together in my brain. You know, the nature of binge watching television nowadays. But there's a lot to go on. So last time we talked about how the Deep did shrooms, the return of A-Train, Maeve talking to Elena again, as well as the introduction of the new girl Stormfront, and getting to explore her a little bit more. Today, we are going to talk about the concept of nice versus good, and how that's an overarching theme for the entire series, as it seems, for this season anyway. We're also going to talk about pretenses and how all the world's a stage. We'll talk about join me on the dark side as well, as that seems to be a multifactorial theme with different characters in true The Boys fashion, where different types of characters are being juxtaposed in these situations so that we can see how different people choose different sides, even when faced with very similar options and circumstances. And lastly, we're going to talk about Stormfront and Starlight's reversal of roles, and how this is really the land of gods and monsters. So, first up, let's pick up where we left off in the last episode. So, the Deep was apologizing to his body and learning to love himself so that he can love others. And then we had Starlight blackmailing her friend Gecko, the guy whose body parts grow back. She blackmailed him into getting her a copy of Compound V, because he works down in the research centers of Vought, because they can just, injure his eyes or his arms and legs, etc., cut them off even, and they'll grow back and he will be fine. That's not to necessarily say it doesn't pain him in any way, but it does mean that he's very useful in scientific research. And I like that they took it there. It is a strange ethical quandary, because technically, Gecko seems to be consenting to this. We certainly know that he is consenting to letting people chop off his arms, legs, his member, etc., for money in seedy motel rooms. But that type of risk-taking behavior could be indicative of someone who feels that they're out of control of different parts of their life. And this is the one area in which they can affect a measure of control over their body. Very similar to eating disorders. And I don't know how much we're going to get to see of Gecko, but that's what I think of when I watch this. That this is a person who probably doesn't really need the money, but he needs some measure of control in his life. Perhaps he has other vices that we don't know about that's leading him to let other people chop off parts of his body for money. He doesn't seem to get any type of sexual fulfillment from it, And he doesn't seem, as far as we can tell, to actually need the money. So, there's that. Gecko's also interesting because he takes us on a ride for another side of ethics, and that's ethics in scientific research. A lot of people are very against doing any type of studies on humans or animals, humans specifically prisoners, or animals, because they are not consenting. And in the case of animals, they're not able to consent. In the case of prisoners, it can be viewed as coercion, so not true consent under the law. So in this way, we're really seeing the possibility of a future in which someone can go, hey, I'm going to volunteer for this. I'm not depressed or trying to kill myself or anything like that. I just want to contribute, and this is the way that I feel I can best contribute. We already have medical trials out there that folks consent to, so this isn't truly that far-fetched. It's just that this man can grow parts of his body back. Now, that doesn't necessarily mean he's not being coerced by Vought. It also doesn't mean that he grew up in a way that would have allowed him access to things socioeconomically to obtain a better life. Socially, he may be considered to be a freak by many people, and that could have resulted in him feeling ostracized, or that the only thing that he can do to make money is to work with his body. I think there are a lot of interesting implications in this character that's introduced this season. And we get to know him mostly through Starlight, who used to go to those church circuits with him. And she does blackmail him, and it is obviously very upsetting to him. Not only is she an old friend, but now she's kind of a big deal, and she's coming to him for help by blackmailing him. So we catch up with Gecko at the Vought meet and greet after Stormfront and Starlight do the Girls Can Do It tour, or the Girls Get It Done tour, is what it is. Maeve is off hanging out with Elena, whose appendix is ruptured, so she skipped out on it because she is an old pro, and Maeve knows that she can just give Ashley the finger and blow this off. It's not like it came directly from anyone that Maeve truly has to listen to. But afterwards, Stormfront's sitting by herself and live streaming trash talk about her own action figure. She's holding the action figure and telling people, this is a piece of crap, don't spend your money on it. And it's very ballsy. It's also somewhat rude, and it seems very arrogant and entitled because she's brand new to the Seven. She has these obligations that come along with that come along with a lot of different types of notoriety. Like if you are in action movies or you're a pro wrestler, then a lot of times you'll get body scanned and they'll create toys that often don't entirely look like you. They'll create video game characters that kind of look like you, things like that, and you might not always love it, but a lot of those contracts require that you perhaps don't trash talk them. So this is pretty wild that she's doing this. She's going, okay, you're making me do this, and I understand that, and I'm going to do it, but I don't have to be happy about it, and I don't have to be quiet about being unhappy about it. You would think that it would result in her being perhaps fired, but it is an interesting strategic move from a PR perspective through the lens of millennials and Gen Z. We like people who speak straight facts, and Stormfront does that. I can totally see the appeal as this old school Captain America style just isn't necessarily winning people over as much anymore. Rather, it's not winning over the new generations. Homelander still tests very well with a lot of folks, but really Stormfront is going to be the one taking these new viewers. She is going to interact better with the feminist viewers. than even a veteran like Maeve or someone like Starlight might. Starlight isn't as willing to buck the system, given that, she got caught hanging out with Huey, who, even though she didn't know it, turned out to be working against Vought, and Homelander almost lasered her for it before Queen Maeve stepped in. So, she is not as willing to buck the system externally, outright, in the public eye. But she does agree with a lot of what Stormfront's saying. So, as she finishes her trash talking and ends her live stream, Starlight walks over and tells her, hey, I really like what you've been saying, and I want to say those things too, I agree. And Stormfront just kind of scoffs at her and accuses her of being a Vought spy. And that is the point at which I start to question Stormfront. To me, this comes across as her gaslighting Starlight by flipping it around on her and accusing her of something that I think that Stormfront may be doing. That really makes a big impact on the other person because it immediately puts them into defense mode. It's something that a lot of people who cheat on their partners do. It's accusing the other person of exactly what you're doing, and it throws them off the scent. Granted, in the case of people cheating on their partners, sometimes that's also just anxiety and stress and paranoia going, oh no, I'm doing this thing, I bet that they are too. But I don't think Stormfront's experiencing any of those other qualities of paranoia or distress at all. It is like she's playing a game. She is too cool for school, and she is above it all. She's playing like 3D chess, it seems. I don't know entirely what she's up to, but I do question her questioning Starlight. I mean, I get it. She does look pretty Vought-y. As Stormfront says, she looks like the Voughtiest of the Voughts. She is hypersexualized. She has big hair. We saw in episode 1 how a lot of who she is has been fabricated, especially for the world stage. It is a lot. It's weighing heavily on Starlight, and she's going, oh my gosh, here's someone who might agree with me. And that's also kind of how moles work. They flush you out by going, hey, this is how I identify. This is what I believe. What about you? So it's not looking good for Starlight, in my opinion. She's getting a little ahead of herself. She's getting a little ballsy in some ways. But she's also still Annie deep down, and she's still too trusting. She's willing to call Huey on his crap because she knows who Huey is. She has already come face to face with that. But she's still giving this brand new person the benefit of the doubt. In fact, she's not even doubting her at all. She's going, hey, I believe you and I agree with you. Let's essentially be bros. And that's not great. Right after Stormfront kind of derisively dismisses her and walks off, Gecko pops up and is giving her the Compound V and a little packet that also has tampons in it. And Starlight's like, dude, I don't have any pockets. I don't have anywhere to put this. Like, we just talked on air about how I don't have pockets in these outfits. Stormfront was going on about it being a feminist issue. And he's like, I don't care. You ever come and try to blackmail me again, I will take you down with me and just admit to everything straight up. This is it. I don't want to talk to you again. And so she needs to go ahead and hide this somewhere. And she tries to tuck it in her boot when A-Train pops up. And somehow she hides it with some sleight of hand in Stormfront's bag/purse instead. Now, I don't know exactly how that works. I would think that A-Train would perhaps need increased acuity of vision in order to run as fast as he does without running into more things. I mean, he ran into Robin in the first episode of season 1, but he also just didn't really care about that. It seems that he burst through people and other objects enough that it's not a big deal for him. Season 1 was largely about the collateral damage that the soups cause. So there's that, but it's weird to me to think that he also couldn't see something like that. I don't think that Starlight could really move fast enough to get that out of A-Train's line of sight. But I digress. Maybe he just wasn't paying good attention because he was looking at her boot. In any case, she seems to go ahead and get away with that. But Gecko is absolutely done with her at this time, so her circle is kind of shrinking. And it's not even just her circle shrinking, but her ring of enemies is simultaneously expanding. We're going to go on a quick break, and when we come back, we are going to talk about Maeve and Elena, as well as Becca, Ryan, and Homelander. Stay tuned.
Want to find out what movies to go see? Then check out the GSMC Movie Podcast. It's your ticket to the latest movies, whether it's a new blockbuster event, romantic, comedy, or action flick. This show has got it all covered. They talk some what to go see now. Don't bother. What's hot on Netflix and everything in between. That's gsmcpodcast.com/movie-podcast. When it's all about the movies, it has to be this new show. Don't forget to like them on Facebook and follow them on Twitter. Visit gsmcpodcast.com for more info.
Welcome back. Before the break, we were catching up with Gecko, Stormfront, and Starlight midway in episode 2 of season 2, including the concept of perhaps Stormfront gaslighting Starlight as she is being a mole, and Starlight really using sleight of hand to try to hide something from A-Train. Not entirely sure I buy it, but in a show about superheroes and such, I'm gonna let it slide. It just bothered me a little bit. And of course, that's why I'm sitting here. I like to pick things apart. I like to discuss sci-fi. So, I digress. But if it bothered you too, please let me know on the internet so I know that I'm not alone. Now we're going to talk about Becca. So, Becca drops Ryan off at piano lessons and says she's going to go meet some lady friend. And then she speeds off to this gated military-looking installation. And while she's there, Homelander's going through her stuff and drinking the milk from the jug in the fridge in a weirdly sexual manner that we briefly discussed last time. I'm sorry, I shouldn't say weirdly sexual. I should not kink shame. It is uncomfortable to watch it because that's the way it's intended to be portrayed, and that's the way it is filmed. And Anthony Starr totally hits that nail on the head. So he does a fantastic job at that, and that's actually something that I'm stoked about, is his range. He pretty much goes full Daniel Day-Lewis in this role of Homelander, and it is frightening and uncomfortable. You're just constantly uncomfortable with this man, and he does a great job at telling stories with his eyes. So shout out to Anthony Starr again. However, we see that he's going through all of her stuff, seeing that photo of Billy and her in a false bottom drawer, and seeming to get a little jealous. He's at least upset about it. So there's that. And then Becca goes to that facility to talk to Dr. Park, someone named Dr. Park, about Homelander. And she's very upset. She's livid. She's gone full mama bear, and she's demanding to be moved and hidden from him. But they decline it and say, just make him happy. He'll probably get bored. And she's really, really upset about that. But she knows that now that Homelander knows about Ryan, there's no way that there's anywhere she can really hide. I don't know if she knows about him not being able to see through zinc, but I also imagine that if there was a big zinc-lined bunker even anywhere in the world, Homelander would eventually know that it was there because he'd be like, oh, okay, I can't see through that. But Dr. Park is really rude and dismissive and tells her that she better be getting back because Ryan's piano lessons are almost over. So it seems she's very much a captive, even before she was a captive of Homelanders. Perhaps she was also already a captive of Vought. In the meantime, Maeve and her ex-girlfriend Elena are chilling in the hospital together, watching Botched. And Elena says she'll let Maeve take her to dinner, but then she remembers that they have to stay in because Maeve is famous. And you can tell that Elena is kind of upset by this, and she maybe feels like Maeve has been hiding her, like she's embarrassed, which is very similar to the relationship dynamic we saw before between Popclaw and A-Train in Season 1. But this diverges and goes a different route. Elena gets really mad and tells Maeve to leave. And Maeve just can't take Elena being mad at her anymore. She loves this person, and the only reason Maeve walked away was because she was afraid of what Homelander might do to Elena. And she finally tells Elena about that. She tells her that Homelander is crazy, he's sociopathic, he's off his rocker, and he's dangerous, and he just kills people, and he makes the rest of them do messed up things too. And so she's terrified that he might ever find out about her and then harm her. And he's the most dangerous person in the world, well and truly. So this isn't something that Maeve is making up, and Elena can tell by her tone and how scared Maeve looks, and just the look in her eyes, too, that she's being incredibly genuine. And Elena's like, why are you telling me this now? And Maeve says that she couldn't take Elena hating her anymore. It's very relatable, and it's a truth shall set you free type of moment. It's going to allow Maeve to love Elena, and for Elena to love her back, perhaps, without being so mad all the time or feel like she's being hidden and that Maeve is keeping all of these secrets from her. But that doesn't necessarily make it safe for Elena. The fact that Maeve's there at all, or the fact that now she knows about Homelander. We don't know how good Elena is at keeping secrets, but for her sake, I hope she is dope at it. We also see Homelander buying Ryan a cell phone, or rather handing Ryan a cell phone. He's not buying it himself. And he says he can call him. And we've established that Ryan's pretty much homeschooled, and he's home a lot of the time, unless he is otherwise with his mother or like at his piano lessons. And so Ryan's like, who am I going to call? And Homelander was like, you can call me. And Ryan's like, okay, trying to look really grateful for this, but also he's absolutely bewildered. He's like a 9-year-old little boy, so he's not even really gotten to the age where they're chatting on the phone with each other all the time. In my experience, that's about age 12 or so. And so he's kind of confused, but he gets that it's a nice gesture and is trying to be the good kid that Becca has raised him as and be appreciative. So Ryan's in bed, and Homelander's essentially tucking him in, and it's very weird. But he confides in Ryan that he's never had a mom or dad, that he made up the story about playing catch with his dad that he told him earlier, and that it doesn't matter though, because both of them are gods. He says that he and Ryan are both gods, and everyone else is inferior to them. It's truly terrifying to consider that he could inculcate this child into his own belief system, as sociopathic as it is. But Ryan seems to be very uncomfortable with this and tries to segue out of it by just being like, hey, I think I should probably be going to bed. And that's a smart move on Ryan's part. He is choosing to essentially fawn. So there's a fight or flight response, and then there's also fawning. And fawning is when you are trying to keep that person happy and you're making a big deal about them. And that's what Homelander's also used to. That's what Madeline Stillwell did with him. And that's why he's not happy with Mr. Edgar. He's used to being able to back people down. And Ryan is also essentially fawning, although he's wearing his discomfort a little bit more on his face. But Homelander's not really that familiar with children, and so he doesn't seem to pick up on it. He's also super stoked about just the idea of having a kid. And it's making him force this relationship quite a bit. So he's trying to skip all of these steps, and it's making Ryan really uncomfortable. He's making him say I love you back to him and stuff. And it's because Homelander didn't have a normal upbringing. He's having Ryan do these things, and Homelander himself is doing these things because he's perhaps seen it on TV or acted it out in one of the Vought movies. So he is going through the motions, and in his own way, he is kind of trying, but he's not trying to forge a connection with Ryan. He's trying to fill that void that he never received as a kid of love and affection with no lies or subterfuge. And he thinks that he can get that with Ryan. But Ryan is reluctant about that, and it kind of looks like it's turning into a nature versus nurture type issue. We know now that soups aren't born, they're made. And that's just soups in general. But I think that we're also heading into territory to see that super villains also aren't just born, they're made. It's partly about your social environment growing up and your emotional wellness and mental health and well-being, whether those things are cared for, whether your needs are met. Technically, Homelander was fed and clothed, things like that. He was taught how to read, how to speak, and everything, but he was not taught how to be a good person. He didn't have anyone modeling that for him, and you can really see that in how he moves through these motions. And when he says, I love you, to Ryan, instead of letting Ryan come to it in his own time, or saying, you know, that's okay, you'll get to it when you're comfortable, he goes, you're supposed to say it back. And it's like he's cueing him for it, like it's a scene in this fantasy land that he is playing out. Because that's what it is. But it's very nature versus nurture, and it's also giving me really strong join me on the dark side vibes and we'll rule together as father and son. Homelander's also spent all of this time feeling like he is the only one of his kind. And through his relationship with Ryan, he's feeling a kinship in more ways than one. He's stoked to have a son, but also to have someone else who is just like him. And he feels that Ryan is better than the other soups too, because he comes directly from Homelander's loins. This is creeping the kid out, and I think this is coming from a place of like the wound of the Fisher King, which is a Jungian type perspective. We'll talk more about Homelander and the Fisher King wound in a future episode. I want to get a few more of these under our belts to see his story arc, so we can really truly dig in with that one. You guys know I'm a big fan of Robert Johnson and also of Carl Jung's work when it comes to analyzing literature, so we'll delve into that in a future episode. But for now, just know that Homelander's trying to fill this weird void by having this child. And as he leaves the room, because the kid's like, hey, I think I should be going to bed, we see that Becca is outside and she's mad. And she's like, you need to leave. You need to be out of here. And he's like, nah, we had a deal and they're running around being free and not dead. So I'm not going anywhere. You're up, Mom. And then asks her if she wants Jiffy Pop. So it's another All-American reference, and it's also him trying to get under her skin, but also mark his territory and just pee all over the place and go, I'm not going anywhere. And then he also just offhandedly reveals to Becca that he knows about her conversation with Dr. Park, just by saying that she's right and he's not going to get bored and just go away. We're going to go on a quick break, and when we come back, we're going to see what the boys find when they break into the address that Mallory gave them. Stay tuned.
Tired of searching the vast jungle of podcasts? Now listen close and hear this out. There's a podcast network that covers just about everything that you've been searching. Hey! The Golden State Media Concepts Podcast Network is here. Nothing less than a podcast bliss with endless hours of podcast coverage. From news, sports, music, fashion, cooking, entertainment, fantasy, football, and so much more. So stop lurking around and go straight out to the Golden State Media Concepts Podcast Network. Guaranteed to fill that podcast itch. Whatever it may be. Visit us at www.gsmcpodcast.com. Follow us on Facebook and Twitter, and download us on iTunes, SoundCloud, and Google Play.
Welcome back. Before the break, we were talking about Maeve and Elena's discussion in the hospital, as well as the relationship between Becca, Ryan, and Homelander. Now we're going to discuss what the boys find when they take the address that Mallory gave them and do what they do best, which is go to cause mayhem. They go to break into this place, and they find a costume shop. So this is a very large costume shop, and it's full of cardboard cutouts and costumes and everything about the Seven. It's highly unnerving to be in there and see a Homelander cardboard cutout while you're going in there to try to find this soup terrorist. But it adds another fun and interesting dimension to the story. They could have picked literally any other type of store. But this gives us the impression that the Seven are watchers. So it's like who watches the Watchmen type of thing. It's like they're ever vigilant and they are all-seeing and all-knowing. And that's also the impression that Homelander has just given Becca. I don't know what his radius is for hearing, but it's kind of following up with that visually and conceptually. So they are in what's really kind of an effigy of the belly of the beast. They're still in a dangerous spot. They're looking for at least one known soup terrorist, but also they have to remember that even though they're looking for a terrorist, that doesn't necessarily mean that the good guys, the Seven, are on their side, or that this is going to mean anything important for them at all. All they have is Mallory's word that she's going to try to help them expunge their records. So while they're in there, Kimiko recognizes an old man in the office part and literally rips his head off. I'm so here for it. She just goes into a rage, clearly recognizing this person. No words are exchanged, no questions, nothing at all. She just kills him. It's kind of like if Han Solo and Chewbacca had a baby that shoots first and doesn't bother asking any questions. They just rip your arms out of your sockets. So I really love that about Kimiko, and she's also, I think, a good person. She's just had a terrible thing done to her, and this is really retribution for it. So Frenchie sees her do that and then sees that the guy has a tattoo and that he's part of the Shining Light Liberation Army, that terrorist group that kidnapped Kimiko and her brother as a kid and forced them to fight for them. And we find out that the soup terrorist is actually her brother. And they speak to each other using hand signs, but it's not ASL or anything like that. It seems to be a language of their own. And Billy goes to still shoot this guy because Billy wants what Billy wants, and he does not care about collateral damage or if people that he is in cahoots with get hurt. Remember, he abandoned the boys last time to go and try to murder Homelander by kidnapping Madeline Stillwell. That's something he could have done at any point after he saved them. But no, he decided he had to do that right then. So Billy's selfish, and he goes to try to shoot the guy, and Huey tries to stop him. He's like, hey, that's her brother. But Billy, of course, goes to shoot anyway, and Huey tackles him, and the soup villain gets away along with Kimiko. And we see that he has telekinetic abilities. He trashes that place. It is hardcore. They get their butts handed to them. But they also now have to go and track them down. And Billy is, shall we say, less than pleased that is happening. He's about ready to freaking kill Huey. We then get a shot back to Starlight and Stormfront. And Starlight is all in her feelings because Stormfront, in their last encounter, accused her of being a spy. And so Starlight's like, I'm not a sellout, and I also want to say what you say about Vought. And Stormfront tells her the story. And she's like, who is the best superhero in the world? And Starlight's like, I don't know, Homelander? And Stormfront's like, no, not Homelander. It's Pippi Longstocking. She's the best superhero because she takes no crap and she speaks her truth and says and does what she wants. Like, she speaks her mind. You should be more like Pippi Longstocking. And then, she's accusing Starlight of being a Vought spy. So that made me really suspicious because she's still portraying her as the embodiment of Vought, knowing that Starlight doesn't feel that way. But, I'm just very suspicious, you guys, as a person in general. But we see that she is using this situation, Starlight that is, to get the Compound V out of Stormfront's backpack. So I'm not sure how many layers there are here of pretense, because all the world's a stage, and that's really what we're seeing happen here. So is it just Stormfront acting? That's not been confirmed, but I suspect. And is it Starlight also playing this game? I'm not sure. Annie's trying to learn how to act while she's already on stage. She's having to improv absolutely everything, including these pretenses. And I'm having trouble telling how much of it is Annie truly being Annie and how much of it is her learning to play the game. I think this is mostly Annie being Annie, but we do know that she at least initiated the conversation so she could get that out of the backpack. Billy, on the other hand, is still really mad at Huey. He wants to punch him, but Mother's Milk stops him. And Billy tells Huey to F off and that the rest of the boys are going to be with him, with Billy. But they actually don't fall in line and follow because in Billy's absence, Kimiko's become one of them. And they're not willing to jeopardize the relationship between her and her brother. They want to see their families again very much, but not at the expense of Kimiko losing hers, because they know that Vought will lock him up and probably do unspeakable tests and scientific studies and torture to this man. So they don't want to do that to one of their friends. But Billy only cares about what Billy wants, and so he doesn't actually care about anyone else getting what they want. And we really start to see that shine through. Sure, Kimiko is a soup and she's new to the group, but Billy also only wants what he wants. He doesn't care about their families either. And we're seeing that. when Butcher admits that Becca is alive and that Homelander showed him her and her son. And the deal is that he finds the soup terrorist and Mallory finds Becca. So now we're not even sure if getting their stuff scrubbed to go back to their families was ever on the table at all. But we do know what Billy finally came clean to Mallory about and why Mallory would be helping him now. But Huey also makes a great point. He's like, look, you left them alone to die? And Billy's like, hey, I left them alone thinking they would get out of that situation like they had thousands of times before. We've worked together many times over the years, and I thought they could handle themselves. And on the one hand, Billy does have a point. They have been in numerous scrapes together over the years. They go way back. And Billy has a lot more experience with them than Huey does. But Huey has more heart in general, whereas Billy's heart is only for Becca. And it's that difference, too, between being good versus nice. Billy's not necessarily good. Billy can be nice when he needs to or when he wants to, but overall, he's not nice and he's not really good either. And I also noticed as I was watching this that Billy does not talk about retrieving or saving the kid. He only talks about Becca. And that's on brand for Billy. But also Becca's a mom now. He doesn't know Becca the mom. And I really doubt that Becca's going to be willing to leave her son. If she didn't care about the kid, she would likely not have had custody of him this whole time. Vought would have just taken him from her and raised them themselves. But they're doing this experiment where they leave him with her and she raises him as he is, but trying to raise him in a natural environment to see how well, I guess, he can come across. I know they're not doing it for the goodness in their heart, and it's not about experimenting on the kid in overt ways, because the kid didn't even know he had powers, and he's never been encouraged to use them before Homelander showed up. Becca's even standing up to Homelander for Ryan, and Homelander is one of the people she's most afraid of in the world. He's likely the person she's most afraid of. He's the person that many people are most afraid of. But for me, her standing her ground and continuing to stand up to Homelander repeatedly shows me that she's already chosen Ryan over Billy. And also the fact that she's even there to begin with and just walked out on Billy means that she already chose Ryan over Billy a long time ago. And we don't have all the details yet, but that's also probably why he doesn't care about Kimiko. It's about familial bond. And although Billy has this bond with Becca, and the phrase is the blood of the covenant is thicker than the water of the womb, it seems that for Becca, that's not necessarily the case. And really, neither is it for Billy, because his covenant and brotherhood with the boys is not anywhere close to the covenant that he has with Becca. She is his everything, quite literally. So he doesn't apply that principle in that manner either. We're going to go on a quick break, and when we come back, we're going to wrap up this episode with the outcome of Kimiko's reunion with her brother, as well as Starlight's confrontation with A-Train. Stay tuned.
Watching TV has changed over time. Streaming has become the new norm. That's why Golden State Media Concepts television podcast dives headfirst to the world of cord cutting. Want to be on the loop of what's hot in Netflix? Or if it's not a preference, what about original shows in Hulu? We've got you covered. Join us as we fill in the blank and talk about movies to stream and what show you should be binging. This is the the Golden State Media Concepts Television Podcast.
Welcome back. Before the break, we were talking about how on brand Billy is in not caring about anyone else except for Becca. The man is single-minded, he has tunnel vision, and Becca is the only light in his life, truly. So she's also the light at the end of his tunnel vision. I'm not really sorry about that wordplay, even if it did probably make you groan. Now we are catching up with Kimiko and her brother. So when we last saw them, they escaped from Billy and the boys. And now we see them talking on a swing set like they're kids. I really love how they chose to show these characters reuniting. And this show is just masterfully made. The cinematography in it, the Billy Joel everywhere, I absolutely love it. It's so much deeper than just carnage. Although the carnage is also really interesting too. I like the realistic look at what superheroes would really look like. It's not going to be super clean if Superman or someone lasers someone. It's going to be messy. If Superman's using X-ray vision all the time, he might be giving people radiation sickness. Who knows? How many times is he doing this? Who's in proximity to him? What is the collateral damage? These are the questions that I've asked for years, and that The Boys is doing a fantastic job getting across on screen. I know that it was also a comic first, graphic novel, and I will have to definitely check that out, but I find that a lot of times it's hard to translate these things to the screen. But I can't wait to see what kind of fantastic imagery is in the comics just based on what I have seen on the TV show so far. But I digress. So Kimiko and her brother are talking on the swing set, right? And they forgive themselves in this conversation. They don't really need to forgive each other, but they're each trying to seek out forgiveness from the other, and in that, learning to forgive themselves because the other one never held that against them. It turns out that her brother can verbally speak, and that Kimiko is still using the hand signs. So perhaps she is not able to speak and hasn't been due to some congenital issue or blast trauma, or it's maybe a personal issue related to psychological trauma. I'm not sure. We don't really know that part yet, but it is interesting that he can also talk. We also see Starlight texting Huey from her room about having the compound V. And she's in her room or her quarters, that huge expansive area that we saw in episode 1 of this season. And it's a little bit crazy, I think, that she's doing that. She's just rushing in there and texting him like it's nothing. Like she doesn't need to also be using a burner phone and all this other stuff. And what happens if Homelander and them find her burner phone? She seems a little reckless right now because she's caught up in the adrenaline and the excitement of getting a hold of the Compound V to go through with their plot of exposing Vought and the fact that soups are made, not born, that she's forgetting to be diligent and mindful of her surroundings. And she gets popped immediately. A-Train is actually in there and confronts her about the Compound V. He threatens her with telling Homelander and goes to leave after giving her this big speech about how he is going to really enjoy her getting her butt handed to her for this and probably, killed. But Starlight calls him on it. Our girl's getting ballsier, just like Huey is. She calls him on it, and also she calls him out on killing Popclaw. So not only is she learning to stand up for herself and she's asserting herself more often now, but she's also proactively gone out of her way to intentionally blackmail Gecko. She's also apparently been proactive about looking into Vought's file on Popclaw, whom she'd likely never even met. Popclaw wasn't the religious circuit type, from what I could tell. And so Annie is likely not to have come in contact with her before, but she went ahead and read this information. And I think that the logical conclusion, she only did this in order to have something on A-Train because she knew he was on her about her letting Huey go. And also the Vought thing. I'm not sure at which point she went and read this file. Perhaps it was a contingency plan while he was in a coma for in case he woke up. I'm not sure. But she gets real nasty about it. The gloves are off. She said that she read the Vought autopsy report on Popclaw and says that she will tell Sports Illustrated about how Popclaw's bone was shattered from just one of the needles that were jammed into her, and that they were all jammed in at once, seemingly. So she pretty much has him right where she needs him at this point, and he pretty much just silently folds. She takes back the compound V from him. He doesn't hand it back. She takes it out of his hand, and then he silently leaves. And at that point, we see how uncomfortable she really was. We see her relax and that she was posturing and just got lucky. So it looks like these press junkets that she has been doing have really been paying off, learning how to truly act as an actress and as a human being in this arena of her life. All the world is a stage. She always has to be on, no matter where she goes, because she's super recognizable, and she has to keep up these pretenses. But now she's learning how to use those pretenses and those acting skills to her advantage. We've seen her encounter with Stormfront, and now with A-Train, where she is using information she has to posture herself, put herself in a position to obtain what she needs. And in that way, Stormfront's not entirely wrong that she's becoming a little Voughty. Do the ends justify the means, though? Perhaps. I guess we will have to keep watching and see. In the meantime, though, Kimiko's brother tells her that their village was destroyed when she tells him, hey, let's go back home. Let's just go home. That's all I want. That's all she's wanted for years. And he's like, we can't. They destroyed the village. So she's like, okay, well, how about we go to Japan? And instead, he says that he's not just going to go home with her, that he's come around to see that Shining Light was right. And she reminds him that they killed their parents. But he's drank the Shining Light Kool-Aid at this point, and he wants her to join him. Again, we have that join the dark side type of theme in which a family member is going, hey, come with me to do this thing that the other one knows is not right. And Kimiko makes a different decision. She declines, vehemently disagrees with him, and he tries to just leave. And she doesn't want to let him go, so he telekinetically blasts her through a high apartment window. But she still manages to get the jump on him and chokes him unconscious, while the boys pull up with the van, and she lets them take him. She's not happy with Billy, and she lets him know that with her eyes and her expression. And he is visibly a little freaked out, because she could totally just rip his head off. But he kind of backs down and doesn't act so gleeful about it. Billy's still mad at Huey, though, and punches him, and says that he'll kill him if Huey ever comes between Butcher and Becca again. And it ends with the song Psycho Killer, which is one of my favorite Talking Heads songs, and it's very befitting for Billy, especially as he is right now with being this close to finding Becca, having this renewed sense of urgency because he now knows she's alive and he's upset that he ever gave up on her to begin with. He would kill anyone for just stepping out of line. Anyone who came between him and his wife right now, he would kill them without any remorse. Remember, he blew that house that Stillwell had thinking the baby was still inside of it. He really doesn't care. He has no qualms about that. And in that way, he's not entirely dissimilar from Homelander. There are important differences, like Billy is not a rapist. He's not there for that power and control. But he just really does not care about how harming other people affects anyone else in the world around him. And he outright killed Mesmer in an airport bathroom. He will publicly kill somebody without remorse. And so Huey knows when Billy tells him that Billy means it. And that really just takes us back to that difference between nice versus good. It's something that Stormfront brings up as a flippant remark, but it's a strong theme for this whole season's trajectory. Someone like Annie is both nice and good, but doing what she did to Gecko, blackmailing him, her means along the way are not necessarily nice or good. Is it technically good because it's in service of the greater good? Perhaps. But at the end of the day, it's not kind and it's not nice. I personally ascribe to the concept that goodness means that you're good to everyone. Someone who is good to you, but not good to the waiter, is not a good person. And I don't like to be around people like that. What defines good for me is how you treat people who cannot do anything for you. You're not going to get anything out of them, and there is no reason to expect that they could even do anything for you, or that there are any ramifications for treating them poorly. If you're still good to people in those situations, then you're a good person. People who are not good can still act nice. That's what Homelander does. He's definitely not good, but he can be nice. He can be nice when he needs to be, when he's on stage. But he is a terrible person. Goodness is a quality of morality, as I see it. And niceness is how someone acts within a given moment. You're not necessarily nice all the time, but you don't have to be nice all the time to be good. There are situations in which being a good person necessitates not being nice. Would Annie have really followed through on blackmailing Gecko? I don't know. It wasn't very nice of her to do that, to even say that to him, but it was in service of what she perceives to be the greater good. The fact that MM and Frenchie and Huey all stood with Kimiko and decided not to turn her brother into Mallory was an act of goodness and kindness and niceness. But they had to have an uncomfortable confrontation with Billy in order to do so. Huey even gets punched because of it. I also don't think that things are necessarily black and white. So Billy is in love with Becca, and she is his sole reason for being, his raison d'être. I may have butchered that, I don't speak French, but that is what immediately comes to mind. His entire happiness and self-worth in his life are all wrapped up in Becca. When he thought she was dead, he didn't have a reason to go on living and tried to blow himself up with Homelander. Retribution was all he cared for at that point, and now all he cares about is finding her. So I don't think Billy is necessarily a bad person. There is good in him. Kind of like how there was good in Darth Vader, and Luke is like, I know that there's still good in you. Becca is able to bring that out of Billy in the way that Luke, through that familial relationship of being Vader's son, was able to pull that out of him. But at the end of the day, how far is she going to be able to go in convincing him to take Ryan with them, or to love Ryan and maybe accept him as, if not his own, at least being her son and someone that's worthy of respect and love. I think that's going to be really difficult for Billy as we continue along. But we'll continue this conversation of nice versus good and the world being a stage, and join me on the dark side as we continue this season and see how all of the different characters react to it. I know that we're only 2 episodes into the reviews right now, but it is so exciting to get to watch season 2 of this. I'm like a little kid at Christmas. I don't often get excited for many things. I don't get excited for my birthday or anything like that, but I am super stoked that this is out now, and I'm kind of sad that we only get 8 episodes, so now I'm trying to pace it out a little bit, but it's a great show, and I'm glad to have you guys joining me in discussing it. If you'd like to talk with me more about it on Facebook, Twitter, or Instagram, please do feel free to hit me up. Thank you for listening to the GSMC Sci-Fi Podcast, brought to you by the GSMC Podcast Network. I'd like to ask that you please subscribe to the show, and writing a nice review always really helps us. Also, if you could please follow us on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram, I'd appreciate it. Thank you kindly, and have a good night.
You've been listening to the Golden State Media Concepts Sci-Fi Podcast, part of the Golden State Media Concepts Podcast Network. You can find this show and others like it at www.gsmcpodcast.com. Download our podcast on iTunes, Stitcher, SoundCloud, and Google Play. Just type in GSMC to find all the shows from the Golden State Media Concepts Podcast Network, from movies to music, from sports to entertainment, and even weird news. You can also follow us on Twitter and on Facebook. Thank you, and we hope you have enjoyed today's program.